Dr. Mark Giese here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about 4 reasons why people are biased to thinking that evil comes always associated with being evil-intentioned. That good always comes associated with being well-intentioned. And those, in fact, are not true. And it's crucial that we get this right because the failure with most socio-political level evil and democides and genocides and what we saw with COVID authoritarianism, and in fact a brush with totalitarianism, was a problem not of bad-intentioned mustache twiddlers. It was a problem with a much of the earth beating as one, trying to do the righteous good thing. And it's exactly those sorts of things which cause the greatest evils. And if we forget that, if we miss this, and we say, look, we just think it was because of this and that cabal of actors who were just trying to line their pockets or do these certain bad-intentioned things, we're going to miss the point. And the next time, when you or me are part of some righteous effort to reorganize society, to save everything with good intent, we're going to be completely blind to the fact that, no, we're the problem. Right? We are the problem. It's exactly those sorts of situations when you think that you and all of this great community, this righteous community that are doing great things to do good, is when evil happens. Now, there's 4 reasons. There's many reasons probably beyond this, but there's 4 reasons that come to mind, not all perfectly independent, for why we are prone to conflating being evil and having ill intent. And so it's evil if and only if bad intentioned, right? Or equivalently, good if and only if good intentioned. And the first reason is simple, and it's sort of the reason that we in the United States and much of the world thought that fat made you fat, because it sounds like a pretty plausible argument. You know, in the absence of any evidence otherwise, fat does seem like the kind of thing that might make you fat, because it just rings right off the tongue, right? Turns out it's not. Fat doesn't make you fat. Sugar does. Carbs do. You know, so it's a big, long story. But it is counterintuitive. It just has a nice ring to it. Evil-intentioned sounds like the kind of thing that makes evil, and it seems like that's all that should matter. The second is that in everyday criminal life, and we've talked about this many times, in everyday normal life, with typical criminal level behavior, the kind of things that we see, stealing and mugging and raping and murdering, the kind of stuff that the police and the FBI go after, those folks, most of the time, know that they're operating outside of the normal moral norms, right? They get that. They're playing a game outside of ethics, and they wouldn't be able to defend it. Occasionally, people might find themselves in some kind of little swirling kind of justification for everything that they do, but for the most part, they get it. They're working outside of the ethics that they were raised in and that they couldn't themselves provide any justification for. Right? That's what normal life is like. We all agree on these norms, and the question is whether you're working with a good intent to further those norms. So good intent can matter within your own community, as we've talked about before. But so again, that's another reason why evil, if and only if evil intention, seems to be a good rule of thumb. A third is that, all of the historical cases of genocides and democides, the way that the social narrative typically records them, I mean, you can go read books in detail, but the social narrative itself typically describes these great evils as monsters, as demons, as out to do evil. We have very cartoony notions that sit within the social narrative in society. Most movies about Nazis don't give them the benefit of all of, it's not benefit, as we talked about before. It is no justification, it is no defense to say that you have good intent. Everybody has good intent at the socio-political level in terms of that kind of evil. But movies about the Nazis never go through and show here's the stuff that they were thinking that was so good and they were righteously doing it. They don't spend time on these sorts of things, and it's important and it would be crucial, I think, for us to do it. Not because you're out to try to show that they aren't evil. The whole point is to show the greatest evils happen with humans, right? These aren't demons, these were humans. Large groups of humans, and social narratives that started to develop that justified awful, awful things, right? the whole point of trying to humanize these great evils in evildoers is to remind us how it happens in society, and that it can happen to you, and it can happen to me, it can happen to everybody and anybody, and you being well-intentioned is not going to save you. You thinking that your well-intentionedness is going to save you is exactly the kind of problem that's going to ensure that something like COVID authoritarianism happens again. Right? And so, and there's a kind of laziness, the kind of the third point was the narratives, the social narratives about the historical evil figures always show them as evil intentions. Really, that was that point. They're kind of cartoony, and they just come across as, yeah, I'm just trying to do evil. That's the typical social narrative cartoon style version. And that's what the victors always do. They don't provide the full story about what their justifications were. And there's just a laziness, that's sort of the fourth point. I'm good intentioned, and I'm in a very good position to tell you whether I'm good intentioned or not, because I can just internally read my mind, and I'm good intentioned. It's really hard to determine whether I'm actually doing good or doing evil. That requires lots of philosophy and ethics and science and potentially, if you're a utilitarian, lots of cost-benefit analyses, which you can't do from an armchair. It's really difficult, right, to figure out whether I'm actually doing evil or good. But it's really easy for me to tell you that I'm good-intentioned, because I really might be. Right? I can do that. So I'm good-intentioned, and so therefore good. Right? When you're talking about your own self or your own political community, I'm good-intentioned. That's the easiest thing. That's the easy thing for me to measure. Oh yeah, I'm good-intentioned. Therefore, I'm good. Right? Now, for your socio-political movement, for you, I can say I can't measure your well-intentionedness. Very hard to do that. But I can see that you have aims that are opposed to my good, and so you're evil. Right? You're proposing evil. You're pushing evil by my standards. And so therefore evil-intentioned. Right? So it's easy for me to measure that you're doing evil by my community standards because you're opposed to my community. So I'll say you're just evil. And so therefore evil-intentioned, something that I cannot, in fact, measure. In both cases, we make the jump from the thing that we can measure easily in a lazy fashion, and then just jump to the conclusion on the other side of this if and only if, which is in some sense presumed all along. Right? But it's actually the case, as we've talked about before, that all sides in sociopolitical movements, of course, there's always a smattering or a peppering of people that are involved in criminality here and there and cover-ups, but that's not what drives these sociopolitical movements and the evil that comes from them. It comes always from well-intentioned communities. The communities themselves evolve complex, sophisticated justifications for their beliefs, and they're often post hoc justifications for them. Right? It is a tautology that they have good intent. So it is not the case that good intent if and only if good, or evil intent if and only if evil. Right? That's broken. For sociopolitical levels, they are always well-intentioned. It is no predictor of whether or not they are doing good. What is a predictor are things that I've talked about in previous videos, and I loop-wired. I had a dozen, which I'll put up here on the screen, a dozen kinds of fundamental violations of certain kinds of principles, which do matter in terms of whether you're doing evil. And that was your science moment. If you haven't gotten a copy of Dr. Tim Barber, my book, Expressly Human, take a look today. And if you have read it, give us a review at Amazon.